YouTube, what's up, man? I'm back with another video. Talk about Stranger Things. Probably last video on this shit. I ain't gonna lie, cause that shit's it's out now. Been a lot of theories, a lot of coping with the fan base. Shit, niggas been making up episodes. And whatever I'm finna react to could either help make me a part of the hive mind with the fan base or make me realize you niggas is crazy. Let's do it though.
Okay, so spoilers, duh. Stranger Things Season 5 finale, we see the gang finally defeat Vecna along with the Mind Flayer in the Abyss, and they make it back to the Upside Down safe and sound. As they're coming back into the real world, they're captured by Dr. K and the military who want to use 11 just like Dr. Brenner did.
And you know, sorry to pause this off rip so quick, but they could just waited it out a little bit longer, you know what I'm saying? Like, they already beat Vecna. I know they probably was in a rush to get the fuck on, but they didn't have to blow up the Upside Down so quick and get caught. I don't know why they thought the military presence stopped in the Upside Down, which was very dumb, but hey.
To avoid this, we see 11 escape and make it back inside the Upside Down before the military can apprehend her. The bomb goes off and she just stands there, heroically, as the entire dimension around her gets ripped to pieces. It's very emotional. Everyone is looking at her and crying, yelling for her to come back to them, but in an instant, she's swept away in a whirlwind and shot out into space, self-sacrificing herself to end the cycle, to avoid Dr. K becoming the nightmare to more children that Brenner once was to 11. We hear the most terrifying noise ever. And then quiet. Everyone takes it in, shocked, and they realize that their girlfriend, their sister, their best friend, their daughter just died in an instant. They almost made it home safe, and at the last second, everything was ripped away from them to end this 10-year-long show. But just hold on. At the end of the episode, we see Mike realize something important at his graduation. The distortion in the speakers reminds him that a year and a half ago, that night he lost 11, he also heard distortion. Kay was using her sonic emitters on 11 to dampen her powers. And if that were true, then she shouldn't have been able to go into the void using her powers while she was standing in the middle of the gate, in range of the kryptonite. Just what if 11 was still actually alive? What if this was an illusion created by her sister Kali, who was barely alive in Hawkins' lab? What if we also missed one very important detail confirming the true fate of 11 at the end of the show? And don't get me wrong, this whole theory of 11 being alive definitely has some parts that make it very questionable.
And see, now that I think about it, I think the niggas that wrote this, the Duffer Bros, bro, I think they did this ending to appease a lot of people. You know, a lot of people, believe it or not, wanted 11 to die. But I think they did it for this fucking theory shit that they got y'all niggas going through. This theory renaissance.
There's a lot of initial plot holes, like how did Mike know?
Alright, so listen up. State Farm was trying to charge me $197 for car insurance. No, thank you. I got a
that Kelly wanted 11 to sacrifice herself? Or how did Kelly not die by the time she tricks the military? Or how did she even know when to cast the invisibility spell? Or how did 11 contact Mike in the void since there was still so much kryptonite around her? But by now, I've rewatched the ending a million times, and believe it or not, I think I've figured everything out. I figured out all the answers to each of these questions and all of the others, and it all makes sense now. I know, the Duffers say that they want it to be open-ended and inconclusive for you to pick your own ending, but what if they put just enough details in all of these scenes to confirm that 11 is still actually alive and Mike's theory was correct? And this isn't even taking into account all of the behind-the-scenes things that point to this. In this footage, you can literally see 11 here. As soon as she hops out of the truck, she turns and sprints towards the Radio Shack. As much as I just want to use this as proof, this is behind-the-scenes footage. After 11 gets out of the truck in the show, she disappears, so Millie can't be in this scene anymore, so she runs out of the view of the cameras for the rest of this shot. But it is nice to think that this is what actually happened, or at least that it's possible. If you're new here, welcome to the channel. I'm Michael J, and I've got a crazy theory for you today. Season 5 was not only the most expensive and most important to close out the end of the show, but it also was supposed to be the most inclusive. They originally said no loose ends, and that it would answer all of our questions, but now that we've all seen it, I can't help but feel like me and a bunch of you guys have way more questions than we started watching with. So today, we are going to definitively answer one of the biggest questions. If you haven't yet, make sure you're subscribed and send this video to all of your Stranger Things friends, because I have a ton of fun Stranger Things videos I've been working very hard on to conclude the end of this massive era, and I would love for you all to be there. Thank you so much for all of your support. Now, let's just go ahead and dive right into this theory. So, as many would expect, the Duffer Brothers didn't want to have to kill off Eleven. She was the main character, the person this entire show was built around. She was their baby. They don't want to kill her off. Not to mention how upset everyone would be if they actually did. I think this is something they chose to do, something they had convinced themselves that they had to do because all of this started with 11. It's only fitting that it ends with 11 too. It rhymes, just like poetry. This season could end just like season 1 did. 11 tells Mike goodbye, and he watches as she goes off and sacrifices herself. This time, not just to save her friends, but also to save all of the future pregnant women and unborn children that would undoubtedly be tested on. Even if they eliminate Dr. K, eventually another mad scientist will come into the picture and take her place doing the exact same thing. If 11 is the last person with powers, all they have to do is remove her from this picture and theoretically the cycle will stop. But before we start, I want to look at two big things I've seen everyone pointing out. One is that you can't see her tattoo on her wrist, and that means this is not the real 11. Well, sorry to tell you, but if you watch this in 4K and brighten it up a bit, you can actually see this dark spot here on her left wrist, right where her tattoo should be. But just because this is here, it doesn't mean that this is real or an illusion. And some people have pointed out that since you can't see her finger flickering in the actual shot from her sacrifice, this means that Mike's theory was false. But this too is irrelevant. When we first see that Cully's illusions can have a flickering finger, in the shot before it, you can't see her finger flickering either, meaning the flicker is too small to see from this far away, or the finger only flickers at the very end of her illusion. In this case, they end up driving away too far for Callie to hold the illusion anymore, and right before she couldn't do it anymore, it flickered. So it could be the same, where at the time of this shot, it wasn't flickering, but in the shot right after, right before she disappears, it is flickering. And that's because this is when Callie was sucked out into the endless void that is space. So both of these initial observations don't disprove Mike's theory. Now we can talk about all the concrete evidence of this being real. And first off, we're going to look at this at face value, from the audience watching this scene. We can see the military stop the gang's vehicles right after they come through the gate. They're brought to a halt, and immediately the military raises their weapons and unloads the back of the truck. And we can see 11 getting out of the truck here. 12 seconds later, Hopper hears kryptonite. He realizes Ella's in danger and looks for her, but he can't find her. Nobody can. And then 29 seconds after the kryptonite turns on, Mike sees 11 standing in the middle of the portal. He starts to run to her and trips and finds himself in the void as 11 walks over. They spend 2 minutes and 17 seconds in the void talking. 11 tells Mike that she needs him to help the others understand her choice, and that even though he himself doesn't understand it now, one day he will, referring to one day when he figures out the truth about what actually happens, or just one day when he matures and has had enough time to process and think about everything rationally. She says, "You've seen me, the real me," referring to the illusion that her in the portal is not the real her. And then the last thing she says is, "Goodbye, Mike," right before she disappears. And this is literally just like season 1. Mike and everybody else was meant to believe that she was gone, that she died. And eventually, we learned that...
Will she feel the same? Back in my neighborhood, bring it on back. Bring it on back. All right, let's get back right. Let's get back right.
That she survived. She was instead transported to a faraway place, another dimension. The exact same thing happened here, except this time she can't come back. Now, the biggest detail that we all should have caught when we first watched this scene is that right after Elle pushes Mike out of the void, there's no blood dripping from her nose. If this was the real 11, there would 100% be blood coming out of her nose. All of this season, even with her training her powers more, she still bleeds every time we see her coming out of the void. This is the first and biggest clue from the Duffer Brothers telling us the real ending. As much as they want to say it's up to the viewer and that Mike has made this to cope with his grief, there's no no way the Duffers wanted to kill 11 off. Her not bleeding from her nose here is a pure giveaway that this was an illusion. And
we have got to the point where literally anybody can build a fully working app without knowing how to code. This is based
like not to mention, they use the exact same song in the credits of this episode for both of the other 2 death fakeouts in the show. The finale's credits song is Heroes by David Bowie. And I don't know if you remember, but in season 1, episode 3, they discover what they think is Will's dead body at the quarry. This was the first death fakeout of the entire series. And right after this happens, we hear the song Heroes, sung by Peter.
Every time a nigga came back to life, that little David Bowie remix, or I don't think they played a real David Bowie song, but they play that shit. They did play that shit at the end of the
Gabriel, which is a cover of the Bowie song. We
this
eventually learned that Will is actually still alive, of course, but in season 3, episode 8, the Battle of Starcourt Mall, Hopper too sacrifices himself to let Joyce close the gate, and a massive explosion follows, leading everyone to believe that Hopper has died. Joyce, 11, the whole town believes he's dead. And right after, they play the exact same song.
Side note, how the fuck did they explain that shit? Because that nigga ended up being the chief of police when he got back. So, he was supposed to have died in a mall fire.
The Heroes cover by Gabriel. Of course, we learn that Hopper's death was also a fake out and he actually survived. And now, in season 5, 11 supposedly dies in the finale, and then guess what song plays in the credits? Heroes. This time, actually sung by David Bowie. There's a pattern here, and they're not even trying to hide it anymore. This is crazy. Now, when Mike tells the story of the mage and introduces his theory about how Elle survived, it raises a lot of important questions for this to actually work. And I think to easily understand everything, we should work through this chronologically as it happens. The first big question, if Mike's theory is true, is Kali used an illusion to let Elle escape, but how did Kali survive for so long after being shot point blank earlier by this doofus here? Well, surprisingly enough, it's very likely if she got shot in the abdomen like we see here, if it didn't hit a major artery, there's a very high possibility she was still alive by the time she needed to be to cast the spell. The initial gunshot itself shouldn't have killed her. The soldier here is using a 9mm Beretta in this shot, and since the military doesn't use hollow points, he's shooting her with just a plain full metal jacket round, which would just punch a hole in you, go right in and out. Since it's nothing super lethal that would expand and cause way more internal damage, it shouldn't kill her off immediately. From when she gets shot to when she makes 11 invisible, it's only
some theories behind this madness.
27 minutes long. A lot of the scenes overlap, and as Kali is bleeding out, the gang is running through the abyss. I mean, it took 10 minutes in real time for the entire finale battle. Even if it was a half hour, or even if we double it, and it was a full hour, Kali would still most likely be able to survive that long from this specific wound. Surprisingly enough, there was a medical study conducted from 1983 to 1987. The years that Stranger Things takes place, and out of 300 incidents of wounds created by this type of weapon to the abdomen, there was an 88% survival rate. If they were able to stop the bleeding, Kali would most likely be fine for the hour she needed to survive to project the illusion. I almost wish we saw Hopper and 11 helping her stop the blood flow before leaving, because that would be rock solid proof that she was fine. We just have to come to terms with 11 doing it before Hopper got back, or Kali herself doing it after they went to the roof. So the next big question is, how did Kali know when to project the illusion of 11? How did she know exactly when to do this? Well, when Hopper left to go get his pack with the medical supplies, Kali and 11 have a moment alone together. And it was here that Kali most likely talked to Elle, just like Mike theorized. Kali knew that she would just slow them down and they had to leave her, but 11 had to go on and still fight Henry. And I think Kali knew that Hopper would not destroy the abyss with Henry and the Mind Flare if Jane didn't return with them. So Hopper needs to think that she is coming home with them. Kali still wanted them to sacrifice themselves to end the cycle, so she had to figure out how to trick Hopper into blowing everything up while giving Jane the choice to run away and live an isolated life. But Kali knew that after everything, when they returned to Hawkins, Dr. K would be waiting for them. I'm honestly surprised everyone else seemingly forgot, but Kali didn't. She told Elle that this would happen, and when it did, to contact her, to go through the void and give her a signal, and she would create a distraction, an illusion to let 11 escape the military's ambush. Kali tells her that she needs to run away and never come back. She must not tell anyone, or they will go looking for her and their sacrifice will all be for nothing. They will eventually find her, and the cycle will start once again. If she chooses not to signal Kali, she will be captured, and her vision of 11 restrained and drained like Kali will will come true. It's the only way. So on the way back to the gate, we see 11 happy in the truck with Mike. And funny enough, in the scene with Derek waving to Mike, we can see 11 drift off. She's smiling right before this at Mike, happy to finally be reunited with him again, and then as soon as she looks away, the smile leaves her face. She drifts off out of her fantasy that this is all done and over and comes back to reality, to the realization that this is not over. They're about to go back into Hawkins and will most likely be met by Kay and her soldiers. Derek waving to Mike is funny enough to distract us from Elle's realization. So when Elle is in the truck and the tires pop, she realizes it's happening. This is the moment that she has to leave. She goes into the void for just a split second to contact Kali and tell her now, just any signal to create the illusion. And with the last of her strength, Kali manages to successfully distract the military and lets 11 escape without being seen by anyone. Now, the next question is a bit smaller, but if there was Dr. K's kryptonite everywhere, how did 11 use her powers to go into the void and talk to Mike? This one is a little bit easier to answer, so if you look at what actually happens, we see Kay stop the vehicles and start to load everyone out. We can see that all of the soldiers are manning the kryptonite weapons, but they're not turned on yet. We see 11 here in this shot is completely able to move around normally and has not been affected yet by the devices because they haven't been turned on yet. Same in this next shot. She's not in pain or anything. It's not until we see Hopper actually hear the devices that they turn them on and 11 is affected. Thankfully, she already alerted Kali when she was still in the truck through the void and was waiting for the illusion. Kali cast the invisibility spell just in time. As the kryptonite turned on, it was affecting 11 even though she was invisible to the military. Even though they couldn't see her, she was still hurting. Usually, this makes 11 cry audibly, and the only reason that it didn't alert the soldiers like it did the other 2 times is because this time it wasn't quiet. There was 30 people yelling in this scene. Soldiers, children, the gang, Dr. K. There was enough noise that 11's grunts weren't audible, and she was able to escape into the radio shack and into the tunnel. But still, how did she get to the point where she could use her powers again? We just saw the military use the device through Hawkins' lab and it affected her through the walls. Well, if we look at what the weapon actually is, Kali says that it's an awful sound. These devices are frequency emitters, which is a sound wave. Theoretically, all 11 needs to do is get to the point where she can't hear these anymore. If she can escape the sound waves, she'll be fine. So going into the radio shack would not be enough. Being inside the hallways in Hawkins' lab wasn't enough. Even in Mike's theory, we can see that Elle is struggling from the kryptonite as she makes her way through this building into the tunnel. But wait a second, think about it. Concrete is nowhere near soundproof. If anything, it amplifies the range by being so hard that the sound waves just bounce off of it, shooting them in more directions. But if you go underground, say into the tunnels, a couple feet of dirt and earth are extremely soundproof. They are way more absorbent than concrete walls. By doing this, going underground would dampen the kryptonite an insane amount, if not entirely, making it way easier for 11 to move even farther away to the point where she could go into the void and talk to Mike. After the last shot we see of 11, there's 12 seconds for her to realize Kali is projecting her in the gate and she's now invisible and she can start heading to the radio shack. And then sometime on her way to the door, the kryptonite turns on. Then there's a full 45 seconds for her to make it to the tunnels and get far enough away to stop and bring Mike into the void for when we see him fall. That is way more than enough time to get underground and move a little bit farther away where she can use her powers again. And
turns out you should never sue the driver who crashed into you after a car accident.
For real?
There's a much better way you could get paid a way bigger check without suing, without going to court, and without...
And another thing we need to address is how did Kali survive the explosion at the lab long enough to project the illusion? Because didn't they blow it up? Well, first off, the explosion itself has been Hollywoodified. The bomb they used does not create a fireball in real life. Murray only brought the one gas can and he put it all in the generator to run the lights. The C4 explosion should have just purely been a detonation, no fireball. But it seems like here, the entire thing was directed upwards into the exotic matter. In all of these shots, the roof of the building looks completely undamaged after. This massive building, being the Department of Energy, was most likely made of entirely concrete, which is best case scenario for surviving the initial blast. And from how far down the helicopter is lighting up the building, it seems like she was a couple floors underneath the roof. Although it does seem like Ellen Hopper might have been hiding in the sludge room that Jonathan proposed to Nancy in, which was right underneath the roof. But even if she was on the top floor, after the explosion the roof is fine. Nothing has started collapsing. The structural integrity integrity of this building is still okay. And the follow-up explosion was simply the dark matter shooting waves outwards towards the walls. The building is still untouched here, so Kali is still fine. The waves of light hit the walls and rip them apart as everything is sucked out into space, but since Kali is in the epicenter, she is in the best possible spot to survive the longest. The outer walls would get the highest suctional force first before it eventually makes it to the center and destroys the lab, meaning that if 11 was actually in the gate in the Upside Down, downtown Hawkins, she would perish before Kali was sucked out, meaning that Kali was still alive and well after the time she needed to be to do this illusion. Now, the next big question is, how did Mike figure all of this out? How does he know about Kali's plan to self-sacrifice? How did he know that Hopper tried to talk 11 out of it? How did he know that Kali was shot and still alive in the Upside Down to cast invisibility? Well, let's rewind a couple episodes to set this up. After Hopper and 11 first return with Kali, Mike is talking in the basement with Hopper when Kali joins them. Mike hears Kali say that she thinks that fighting Henry is pointless and that killing him won't end this. He also learns that Kali got into 11's head back at the church, and ever since 11 has been off. Kali tells them that the only reason she's still here is to make sure that none of this ever happens again. And this is all super suspicious to Mike. He confronts Elle about this in Hopper's cabin, and she just completely shuts down. She tells him it doesn't matter and you can't help me with this. And then she tells him that they're restarting the MK Ultra program, and with 11's blood, they can make more Henrys. And then we cut to the final mission. Going into this, Mike checks on Elle multiple times and asks if she's okay because she's being so weird. Something's off about her. Even when he says goodbye at the lab and talks to her for a bit, she just turns and walks away. She never says anything back to him. He can obviously tell something is bothering her way more than just getting ready to fight Henry. And after 11 dies or sacrifices herself, there's a year and a half before we see them again. I think in this time, Mike really struggled to accept 11's death. When Karen calls Joyce, she reveals that Mike is missing again, like he's been running off a lot without telling anyone. And I doubt this is the first time that Hopper had to go find him and track him down. And sure enough, he knew exactly where to look. This memorial, dedicated to everyone that died due to what the town is calling an earthquake. He's at 11's grave, no doubt.
The military and the government be having the dumbest explanations for this shit.
Him and Hop have both spent a lot of time here in the last year, and Hopper knows that Mike was the next person closest to Elle, and he knows firsthand how hard it is to deal with losing someone you love. I think in an effort to give Mike closure and to help him cope, I think Hopper sat Mike down and tells him everything that happened. I don't see how he couldn't have done this. I think he told him how Kali tried to get 11 to stay in the abyss, and that he eventually convinced her not to do it. He even made 100% sure that she came back with them before setting off the explosives, just so that didn't happen. And as Hopper is telling Mike, he's telling him from his perspective, that he watched Kali die in the Upside Down. And Mike has no doubt thought about this day, about what Hopper told him for the next year and a half. And when he hears the distortion at graduation, it clicks. He remembers everything Hopper told him and was able to figure out what actually happened. And it's so perfect that Mike was the one to figure this out. The dungeon master, the writer of all of their campaigns and endings. He loved doing that. That's what he spends his free time doing. And now we see that he continues to do that. I love that he was able to piece this together. He was most likely the only one that Hopper told about what happened with Elle and Kali. Maybe Hopper told the others, like debriefed everyone when he got back, but maybe it was just Joyce, but he for sure had to tell Mike. I'd like to think that later in life, Mike will 100% at some point leave Hawkins and disappear, go off on an adventure searching to find 11. I can't imagine him not doing this at some point, even if it takes years to find her. I mean, when he thought she died at the end of season 1, he said he never stopped believing that she was still out there. He sat down and called her every single night without fail. He's going to do the exact same thing now. There's no way that he'd give up on her, especially after piecing this theory together. And I think with everything we just discussed in this video, it's too hard now to believe that she didn't survive. I just wonder if Mike ever shares this theory with anyone besides the gang in his basement. I wonder if he ever tells Hopper or Joyce. I don't think he could. Not only because if either of them knew, especially Hopper, he would for sure go searching for her immediately, endangering her by being found by the military and making her entire death fake out completely useless. Plus, last time everyone thought 11 was dead, Hopper kept the secret from Mike to protect her, and now it seems like Mike is going to do the same thing to him. That's kind of funny. I am curious how Hopper coped with her death, if he's got his own theory and has gaslit himself into believing she's still out there somewhere, or if he's just matured and has gone to therapy and slowly come to terms with her decision, and accepted that it was her choice to make this time. I could really use a couple books following up on everything after this season. Thank you so much for watching. Tell me in the comments what you think of this theory, or if you have any questions that I missed, I'll try to answer.
A good book wrapping it up, man. Give these people some hope, man. They need some hope. These theories is getting crazy. Even though this theory was alright, it really wasn't that far off. I believe it. I believe it for the most part because this shit really don't make no sense. But Stranger Things as a whole don't make no sense, man. These niggas should have been dead in season 4. But shit, be safe.